Joining me today, as usual, is my co-host, Deep Freeze, Ryan Janot. Ryan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. And I guess this topic today continues to build, especially when it comes to retirement. Lots of people are going to be retiring over the next little bit. And I think it's important for us to
Maybe.
continue. Well, I guess, yes. Yes, maybe temporarily going to be putting on hold for some clients that are likely sitting at banks that aren't doing anything with their retirement or having a plan with it. But for us, I think part of the conversation today is about longevity, and we talk about bits and pieces on other podcasts about how to prepare. So it's very interesting that we continue to build upon a lot of things that clients are asking us about, and obviously we wanted to bring in an expert in Denis onto the show. So
Yeah, so joining us is once again our portfolio manager at TvH Wealth, Denis Bisson. Denis, how are you doing on this lovely, I guess is the third tariff decline day, market decline day?
Yes, and it's been a wild ride today, back and forth, back and forth. Anytime a little positive rumor comes about, markets back up in the green, but that turns out in about 10 minutes back to down 500 when that rumor proves false.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen actually this level of swings from a positive to negative. I can't recall seeing that. Like, I don't even think during the 2008 correction, it was usually one day down, the next day up, but not all within the same day. So, anyways, interesting times, and that's why we want to talk about reframing retirement. It's an article that Denis actually brought to our attention, and we want to talk about people looking to maybe change what the thought of retirement really is. And I think timing again is also perfect considering what's happening in the marketplace, because part of the reframing of retirement is the fact that you could potentially live a lot longer than you think. You could potentially outlive your money as well. And when you're dealing with some major volatility like we have over the last 3 to 4 days, you can actually run out even sooner than anticipated. So we're going to work off of the article itself. And we're going to first start off with the longevity bonus. Retirement is about redistributing time, not just extending it. So, Denis, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that part of the article.
Well, longevity bonus is really you're living longer. There's in retirement, there's phases what you're going to be in retirement. More active period when you're younger, and that's when you may want to do a little more traveling, join clubs, health clubs, and everything else. And then as you get approach 80, you're starting to slow down a little, maybe not retire or travel as much as you wanted to or can. Um, the longevity bonus is there, but the health is sometimes not there. So depending on what your health situation is, that you may live a little longer, but you won't be as active for health reasons. And I've seen that already in some clients and some friends as well.
Right. But I think a big part of it is once upon a time, retirement, the goal was you set your age at 65. You're basically running hard for 35, 40 years, and then you stop and you try to enjoy the final years of your life in retirement. And I think that thought process is shifting, where I think people, instead of doing that 35-year hard sprint, they're more or less saying, you know what, we're going to actually maybe work past age 65, but maybe take a little bit more breaks throughout our younger years and our working years, right? Take some time off, take a sabbatical. I've seen a lot of people do that, where they've taken 3 6 months leave of absence and they've just traveled, right? Because as we're living longer and healthier, people are tending or wanting to work a little bit longer because they're able to. So, Ryan, I don't know, can you maybe add a little bit to that?
yeah,
Yeah.
again, the
Go ahead.
idea of what the idea of what retirement is changing and how people are taking those breaks, as you said, and I find people either taking that time off and then reintroducing themselves into the workforce in a different way. Whether I know clients, I always recommend sometimes you can often go back as a consultant to your previous company, right? Because they haven't trained the next generation quite yet. And you're kind of living on your terms. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people are starting to realize. I don't have to hard stop retirement, but I can start living on my terms because of what I've done to accumulate the wealth. You're working with a great team like us to make sure that, things that are happening in the market aren't going to affect you as much as most people are. But I think that conversation and dialogue, and as we've talked a lot on our podcast too, is like that mental preparation for. And I found one of the interesting things with this was often I do ask clients, like, what does retirement look like for you? But really starting to plan out phases within your retirement. And that, as Denis, you said, that first 4 or 5 years this is the first wave of my retirement. Let's get some traveling done while I'm still young and have the energy and the health there, and being able to use that transition and then supplement by going back to work slowly to supplement some of the other fun things that they're hopefully doing, or potentially funding the next generation and helping grandkids, things like that. So
Yeah, but the shift is starting during people's working years, right? I know I can speak for myself personally. I've never really been someone who said, "Hey, I need to shut it down by 65, and I can't wait till I reach that point and then I'm done." I enjoy what I do. I like working. It keeps me sharp. It's a little bit easier now with less travel than what I used to have to do, right? But as a result of that, it also means that while I'm working, I take more breaks along the way, right? So again, I'm not doing the crazy hours like I used to in my 20s, even in my 30s. I take Fridays off, usually in the summertime, because summer season is my favorite season. So I work 4 days a week, and I'm able to do that. I have that ability. Sometimes I only work 3 days a week because everyone else is enjoying ice cream and sitting at the patio. So why shouldn't I, right? But because of that, it also means that I'm not burnt out by the time I'm 65. Like a lot of people who want to retire, there's a bit of a burnout factor, right? And part of it too is financially. Like many people, they're afraid they might run out of money, so they might have to just keep working to keep building their retirement savings to make sure that it's going to be there for them for the next 20, 25 years, because that's how long you can actually be in retirement, right? Denis, I don't know. What do you experience with your clients? Do you have many of them who say, "I'm shutting it down at 65 and doing that hard sprint," or do you find there's a bit of a mindset shift in their thought process?
Well, 65 is definitely a target date, partly because CPP is just there that you're going to get the CPP without any cuts. You take it before 65, you're going to start getting reduced payment. Take it at 65, no reduced payment, and you could take it in full, or you could even get the enhanced version if you're going to start taking CPP a little later on after 65. So that's in some people's minds. But I do find that some clients, more than before, they are looking at potentially working an extra year or two. Partly because, yes, they may need the income, but partly because they're just not ready mentally yet either. And I've seen, I don't know about your area, but I've seen in retail, a lot of seniors are taking some of the retail positions in our area.
Hmm.
I go to a younger, well, you may seem younger. I go to my hometown, and it's still all basically kids on the cashiers and in retail. But over here, because I guess the population here is a little older, you're starting to see seniors, and they do that partly to continue with a social group. They're working with people, they're around people all the time. They're not at home potentially doing nothing. And some people do it as a need because they need extra income because what they're getting is just not enough. You're starting to see a little more single people, whether they're widowed or whether marriage breakdown or never got married. I'm seeing a lot more of all three lately.
Hmm.
That it's a little, they're paying the bills by themselves, so
Right.
they may need that income, but at the same time, they don't want to be alone by themselves. So it's a combination of things of why people are continuing to work.
Yeah, and speaking about people who retire single, we're looking to have an episode in a few weeks' time that actually talks about the tax burden that a single retiree experiences compared to a couple who are living retirement. So stay tuned for that in the future. Ryan, financial planning or retirement planning used to be about, well, spreadsheets when I first started, and then it kind of went to charts and graphs and pie charts, and you get the 50-page report and whatever else. But it's really become so much more than that. It's definitely more of a holistic approach. especially when we talk to clients, it's not just about the numbers. That's
Yeah.
obviously a very important aspect of it. But there's things like being mentally prepared and socially, like how are you going to connect when you retire, right? So these are some of the things that um, people really need to think about as they approach retirement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we've made it such an important part of our discovery with clients when preparing and asking those questions. You know, for a lot of people, it's a second win to discover something new or to rediscover something. As you mentioned, you're rediscovering the guitar, right? And that social and mental aspect of it, and being engaged, because as we spotted on one of our previous podcasts, you know, when it comes to people going to retirement, especially men, depression sets in, right? And that is that takes a huge hit on your mental health. And a again, the shocking number was what, over a quarter of people have potentially passing away because of the mental illness that is set in, because they don't find those things to be engaged in, find social settings to be a part of, to upkeep, and finding something to learn and grow. We're always learning and growing, and it's almost like there's this hard wall at 65 that has always been thought of in the past of, once 65 happens, I don't have to learn anymore, I don't have to go to work anymore. But that's not the case. And you know, studies have shown the more actively engaged socially, mentally, and physically you are, the longer life. And again, this is part of what we're talking about, is that we have to prepare for the fact that, yeah, at age 65, you're potentially living another 20 to 35 years past that. So how have you prepared? How have your advisors or your institutions helped you prepare for that next stage, and started having that dialogue with you to make sure that you do have the right amount of money to help fund your retirement, however long that might be. So it's important that the holistic piece, which I sometimes don't like to say holistic, but it's just the all encompassing things that you don't take into consideration, that we want to make sure that at TVH and TVH Group, that we're always considering, that we're taking care of your health and well-being as a whole, to make you and your family think about it. So
Yeah, that 25% of premature death in retirement was directly linked to loneliness.
yeah.
So people who felt lonely, 25% of them passed away earlier than they really needed to because of that loneliness, right? Which is sad in many ways. So, and I think that's one of the things that we, you know, I know that I've had clients retire and then they struggle for a period of time, but then they finally find that one thing that they truly enjoy. Like some of them get into painting and art. Others get into volunteering. They'll volunteer at the local church or hospital or local organization. So really, it's some of the things that people should consider is how are you going to continue to grow in retirement? It isn't all of a sudden you're done, you stop, and you kind of shrivel away. Like that's a sad way of looking at retirement. Really, it's a growth opportunity. What are some of the things that you didn't do or missed out on because you were busy in your career, raising a family, doing all those things, right? Now is your perfect opportunity to kind of really do those things, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think from a holistic point of view, we use the word holistic when it comes to looking at the financial picture. But really, I think we got to go above that and look at how are you going to basically live through retirement, right? It's
Yeah,
very
there's
important.
it's pointed out, I think, in the article. It just talks about planning for a purpose-driven retirement,
Yeah.
and again, planning those stages, whether it's the travel piece, but always taking consideration the other things that could happen along the way, and that's where we do a great job. So
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I was gonna
Denis, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I tell clients you got to envision retirement. What are you going to be doing all day? How is going to be structured time? Structured time is much better. You know what you're going to be doing. You don't have to write an agenda or anything like that. Because I know some of people in my family do that. But at least have an idea of what you're going to do and what's going on. Unstructured time, as I think Ryan mentioned this before, can lead to depression. So
Mhm.
in the meantime, if you can envision retirement, you have a better idea of what you're going to do throughout the day and throughout retirement. You got to see yourself there. If you can't see yourself in retirement, then you probably should continue working because if you don't retire to something, then there will be nothing there. One of my when I was younger in my career, one of my bosses retired. He went sailing. Now I know most people would not look at that as something to do, but he went sailing around for about 5 years. Didn't hear of him, and all of a sudden I find out about 67 years later, he's back at work doing some part-time work with the bank
Right.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's the one who gave the speech when he said you have to retire to something, and he was happy to say what he was doing.
Yeah.
But when that ended, there wasn't there wasn't the next thing. So he started to come back to work for a bit.
Yeah, when you retire too, and the article points this out too, which is you're freeing up 40 hours a week, 48 hours including possible travel time, which equivalent is the equivalent of around 2,000 extra hours in a year that you kind of have to plan and structure some purpose around to avoid, again, being lonely or affecting your wellness in whatever way, whether it's the health, mental aspects, or fitness. So,
Yeah.
yeah, again, the article did talk about like time and that the free time isn't always a gift, right?
Mhm.
And being able to find the ideal day. And I know I've asked clients that question. When you're in retirement, what would the ideal day be for you? And in the beginning, it's always sleeping in and eating what I want and not having to rush to work and things like that. But that will only last so long,
Yeah.
right? Before you're, I'd say, 10 days in before you're like, okay, I know when I'm on vacation, it's like, what do we do now? Right?
Yeah.
There's only so many books you can read to keep you mentally. So it's finding that balance of how to invest your time and how to feel fulfilled within that time that you're using. So, and again, I think coming from us as advisors too, and saying like I don't think I'll ever truly retire either. I love what I do. I work with great people. Sometimes strange from time to time, but always a good dad joke to share, right? So, but yeah,
Oh, we keep those amongst ourselves, Ryan. We don't want to get in trouble.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
one of the
So
keys, and you sort of hit it there when you're at work and you're making jokes and things like that. One of the keys when you're retired is to build a social network,
Yeah.
build friends, and that network could be very different than when you were working. So to build that social network, and that's when you're going to get volunteering, health breaks. You could go hiking, walking, meet people at the gym. It's funny when I go to the gym now. When I was younger, it was rare to see somebody over 30. Now the majority of the people are over 40, if not over 50, at the gym.
mhm.
So it's
Hmm.
people. Some of them are there every day because they are retired, and they have a full social network. So that's one of the keys. And I know, Jim, you're going to say funny, but I thought you were going to say a joke, but
I was going to say that you remind me of the Incredible Hulk. You're just nice and calm, and then probably just go roar, just go crazy. So sorry, I had to get that out of there, out of the system.
I picture Denis having a large following for Instagram on his workout
Yeah,
routines at the gym. So
the Incredible Bisson.
yeah,
oh, there you
you know, well, you know what? The social aspect is really important, and I'm going to equate this to even friends of mine who over the years played hockey or sports, right? And I will say this, and many of them will say the same thing who have stopped playing. The one thing that they miss the most is that social connection with their friends, right? It's that that connection in the change room before and after a game and hanging out afterwards. Retirement is no different, right? Is you're surrounded by people, there's that connection, and if you no longer are part of that group, you do feel like an outcast and you do feel lonely at times, right? So you just have to find new groups and new opportunities. And Ryan, to your point, when you were saying how you freed up 40 hours a week when you retire, that equates to about 2,000 hours a year. It's no different than when we kind of help out with cash flow planning and we uncover X amount of dollars, free dollars. If we don't do anything with it, nothing's going to change, right? I mean, that money's just going to go stale and whatever else. You have to do something with that found money to be effective. You have to do something with that found time. Take some of it for yourself, lay on the couch, watch, TV and do whatever. But you need to really redirect some of that found time into something productive, because again, it might be for the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Right.
So something we've never talked about, and I'm going to bring it up, which is, you're suddenly in, if you have a partner, especially, you're suddenly in their space, right? And you're both of you have this life outside of work, and suddenly the two of you are in a house. So there's some great opportunities to date your partner again, great opportunities to discover things on your own, and making sure that that you set almost, I want to say, ground rules of like understanding between, because now it's a completely different shift in the lifestyle that you guys are having, right? Whether it's reading a book together, or doing dance classes together, or taking something, but also making sure that you have your own separate time. But again, we talk about the cash flow and coaching that we do. Like, often it's like having couples therapy, because suddenly you're potentially spending money in a different way because you have all this extra time, right? It's how many people during the COVID days were constantly ordering stuff on Amazon, right? And just like free flowing of all these packages coming to the house. So you have to be careful. So there's two subjects that are happening there, which is, one, reconnecting with your partner, and obviously, people will discover we may not have everything in common anymore. So you have to rekindle it. And then the second piece is, now that you're no longer working, you have that opportunity to potentially spend a lot more than you were initially thought you were. And that was another important piece of, going through the cash flow piece with ourselves and clients, is discovering what are the committed costs that we're going to have during retirement. What are some other things that we're gonna expect during retirement that we're going to be able to spend our money on without suddenly blowing it in the first 3 to 5 years of retirement, and then being forced to have to go back to work, right? So,
well, I think I'm going to Dr. Phil it here, because I think, going back to the rekindling of the relationship, I really think people need to start doing that a few years before retirement. And the reason why I say that is, gray divorce is a thing, right? A lot of people are getting divorced after 25, 30 years of marriage, because what's happened is, all of a sudden the kids are gone, it's the two of them, and they've realized they just can't stand each other, right? And the marriage worked, or the relationship worked, because they were into this family environment and weren't side by side day in and day out, right? They had that separation. So I look at, for example, my brother-in-law, my sister. Now, they're not retiring or anything, but they started their family at a very young age, and now, my sister is turning 50 next month, so happy birthday to Rose. But her kids are all adults now, still living at home, but kind of doing their own thing. And it's been really cute and satisfying for me to watch how my sister and my brother-in-law, they do a lot more things together now, and they enjoy each other's company. They'll go out and have dinners and try out different things, and they legitimately enjoy it, right? And I think they're going to have a more successful retirement, because it's not going to go from cold turkey all of a sudden, like, hey, we've had this family and now boom, it's just you and me, right? They've had that time to transition. I think people really need to do that, is figure out the things that you enjoy doing together, but you also have to have your own separate activities as well, right? Because I think we all need that. So that's kind of like my 2 cents on the whole, preparing for retirement and trying to avoid divorce, because I think that's sad that when I hear, it's common, after 25, 30 years, that people are divorcing, and it's just because they realize that the marriage only worked because of the family. That's kind of sad, right? Yeah. Anything else you guys want to add to any of that?
Next is on a positive view of aging.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Here's the thing. So the next one, curiosity and lifelong learning. So retirement is an evolution. It's not a single decision. So this is again where people kind of find themselves. I know I had friends after high school, they would go on European trips to find themselves, but now we're finding retirees are doing things to find themselves, and it is an evolution. It's not just okay, we're done and we're just going to sit on the couch and watch TV all day long. You kind of find out more about yourself. You find out more about your spouse if you're married, and maybe I talk about my father-in-law again. He was a surgeon for over 55 years. What we didn't know was he actually wanted to be an engineer. It was his dad who encouraged him to become a surgeon. So in retirement, all of a sudden he's welding and welding like some pretty fantastic pieces that he's creating himself, and he's designing and engineering it. It was always in him, but he really didn't use that skill set until after he retired, right? So you can kind of find out more about yourself when you are retired, because you have a lot more time too,
Yeah, definitely.
right? So that's really pretty much what the article talked about. Looking at things from a holistic point of view. I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to speak to on what's in the article, or if you want to kind of talk a little bit more about what's happening now in the markets and why longevity and even time is potentially a problem in retirement as it relates to the markets, right? Because here's one of the things that I find, and I think, Ryan, I know you've mentioned this as well. Some clients retire, and because they want to keep themselves happy and busy, they start to self-manage their own money. And they're learning how to invest all of their nest egg during retirement. And I've seen some really bad situations, right, because of all that time. And then we're looking at the last 3 days, for example, where I don't know, Denis, like what are the markets, what have they lost so far? Like well over 10%, 15% in 3 days?
Yeah, depending on how you're invested, yeah, and what market you're looking at. What we were seeing in very good returns in Europe, they're all gone. Those returns before this started correcting. So
Right.
yeah, you're seeing fixed income still positive. Obviously, the alternatives are still positive, but the equity markets have been hit hard and are in negative territory and getting into double digits.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I don't know too many DIY investors or DIY retirees who are investing in their own funds that are investing in things like alternatives and fixed income. Usually they're buying stock, they're buying Bitcoin, they're selecting individual securities without really considering the potential downside, right?
Yeah, yeah. And we talked about this before. When everything's going up and going up by a lot, nobody cares why they're going up and the amount of risk they are taking. That gets a big review once they start going down and going down hard. I think somebody
Yeah,
said, I was watching CNBC, I think somebody said we're down to about September now, where the market was in September.
yeah,
So all those nice gains, post-election, everything you want to say about that, are gone.
yeah,
You're looking at the Magnificent Seven are getting hit one of the hardest. They went up the most. They're getting hit the hardest.
yeah.
I was starting to see Microsoft before these last 3-day correction and getting notifications that it's hitting a 52-week low.
Hmm,
Well, and guaranteed it hit a lot more than that in the last 3 days because
right.
they are being hit hard.
Yeah. And the problem with again, someone who's retired who takes on the role of investing their own portfolio, who's learning to do it at that period of time, they can potentially wipe out their retirement portfolio. So usually what we say is you want to learn about investing, you want to learn about money, wonderful. Take a percentage of your assets and use that to learn and invest and whatever else. Don't take the whole thing, right? Have someone professional manage it for you, because they will look at various asset classes, diversify. They're not going to make decisions based on FOMO and kind of what's being reported out there in social media or the news, right? So that's one of the things that we do encourage people who are retired, who have the time, who are looking for something to do. Investing is one of them, but don't all of a sudden go 100% in, right? Just maybe work with a bit of your assets to kind of keep you busy, but
Yeah.
let someone professional manage it for you.
Yeah, the key is, especially when you're retired, there's no new job monies coming in, so you don't have a revenue. You're really taking out or receiving a pension.
Yeah,
So when there's no new money coming in, you got to be a little more careful
yeah,
because even when some brokers had the experience that during the last correction that
mhm,
they found out all their clients were basically in the much higher risk level than they should have been,
yep,
and everything fell apart
yep,
for him because of that.
yep.
Yeah.
Well, what I find right now is I've had clients question me about some of the strategies that we put them in place because again, they're very conservative, they're very protective. Management fees are a little bit higher than what you typically would experience kind of doing things out on your own. And they'll always say to me, well, that's, I'm paying too much in fees and I want out and do something else. When they're dealing with what we're dealing with now, no one complains about the fees that they're paying to guarantee their income,
Yeah.
right? It's one of the reasons why defined benefit pension plans are becoming very rare unless you're a government employee, right? A lot of the corporations aren't offering them because they're very costly and expensive to maintain. But there are a lot of people who enjoyed those pensions because they knew that it was guaranteed. Again, assuming it came from a government program, private. I think that's a whole different podcast episode, right? Because I think people think that they're guaranteed and they're not, right? And we're seeing that now with some recent bankruptcies as well, and some other bankruptcies along the way. But really, one of the things we like to stress is have those guaranteed sources because they will protect you during these downtimes. This is when you're going to sleep at night. Have your portfolio structured like Denis does at TvH Wealth, right? Where they're more pension style in terms of how many asset classes and how they're distributed within the portfolio, depending on your risk profile, obviously. Because again, it's times like this where the last thing you want to do is log in your portal and see that your $500,000 portfolio is now worth 400,000. I think that would cause a lot of shock to a lot of people, specifically retirees, right?
Yeah. Well, the key in the markets like this is active management. If you
Yeah,
filled out the questionnaire and got a portfolio and that doesn't change, usually doesn't change,
mhm,
active management will adjust. Because right now we're in a position is the economy going to strengthen or are we going to a recession? What are interest rates going to do? What is inflation going to do? Earnings, how are earnings going to be affected on some of these major companies?
mhm,
As an active manager, we can readjust if we see these tariffs lasting longer. Everything I mentioned is going to change. So your portfolio has to change. Is this the time to invest in more small and mid caps? Well, no, not really. If the economy is going into a recession, they get hit the hardest. So this is
yep,
the time where active management is key because they're able to adjust with the market or with the new predictions. Now I know there's some dire ones out there. I wouldn't make any major changes after just a week of this.
mhm,
We'll see what comes about, but it's the ability to make that change to still get the best returns you can in a bad market.
yeah. So we've talked about this article that talks about longevity in retirement, some of the things you might want to consider doing from a holistic point of view, not just financially, from a financial perspective, but also from just a personal level, right? We've talked a little bit about the markets and them correcting right now. And again, why that longevity, that is a real thing. People are living longer, people are retired longer than they used to be, right? Want to make sure that you have your funds that are there for as long as you're alive and don't have to worry about running out of that money. So, any final thoughts, Ryan, before we shut things down?
I think obviously not starting retirement or thinking about retirement, 30 days out or 60 days out is a big important piece. As you said, looking at it at least 5 years or even 10 years or thinking
Yeah,
about it with an advisor that's properly having these conversations, whether you're 20 years out of retirement or 10 years or 5 years, that it's in the back burner and it's always being discussed. So if it hasn't been, no matter what age you're at, I think it's important to start having that dialogue with your advisor. Otherwise, as we'll tell people, TvH financial.ca, give us a call or reach out to us to start having that dialogue of what retirement will actually look like, and for yourself to do a little bit of homework. When you're sitting on the back patio when it's nice out, thinking, what does this retirement gonna look like or feel like for me for my first stage of retirement? And I think it's an important question, an important thought process that people need to do more of, and to have that dialogue with other friends and family that might be affected by how you spend your retirement. So,
Correct. And Denis, any final comments you want to make?
The only thing I would want to say is that planning is key, and it's not do a financial plan once and done, and you don't look at it again. It's continuing reviewing it, deciding, looking at your own lifestyle, you, your wife, yourself. Are you planning? Especially if there's long life in your family, you got to look at it. You got to sort of start looking, planning at potentially being in a retirement home, long-term care home. It's planning for all these and where you're going to get the funds. I know a lot of people fund their retirement home by selling their house, but it is that planning. It's always talking and looking what's up, as opposed to because some of these institutions I mentioned have waiting lists. So some of them are subsidized, some of them are not. So continue that planning by talking to us and getting ready for it ahead of time.
But talking to your family too, right? It's not just speaking to us as the professionals, but talking to your family about, what your goals are, what your wishes are in terms of retirement, what you'd like to do. They can help you. They can step in, and if you need to be kept busy and you'd like to be kept busy, if you have kids, I'm sure they can find ways to keep you busy, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing. So, speak to us, obviously, speak to your professionals, your advisors, but talk to your friends and family. Speak to people who are retired and have been for a while. Ask them what their challenges have been. What would they do differently in preparing for retirement? That's a big one, right? Is speak to others as well. Perfect.
I agree completely.
Well, guys, that's another one in the books. So if people want to find us, Denis, they can find you tvhwealth.ca. With Ryan and I, you can find us tvhfinancial.ca. If you want to take a look at the entire group and all the services that we offer, tvhgroup.ca. And obviously, we have our social media platforms. Find us there. And you know what? If you have any questions specifically around what's happening to the markets right now, what you think you should or shouldn't do during this period of time, we'd be more than happy to reach us, for you to reach us as well. So on the various websites, there's a contact page. Go ahead and submit a question through there, and we'd be more than happy to connect with you. So, guys, thank you once again, and until next time, have a wonderful afternoon. Take care. Alrighty.